Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. And I'm the relationship coach for SingleMuslim.com and your host for tonight, Fahima Mohammad. Welcome all you dear viewers watching internationally from all over streaming platforms, whether it's Sky TV, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I welcome you all tonight. And we have another topic and guest for you. Please do call in the live show. The number's at the bottom of your screen. It would be amazing to hear you participate in the discussion, which is 01924 231 083. And there's also a free WhatsApp service where you can write down your comments and send it to us for free, which is 07950797017. And if you're calling in, the national standard rate does apply from your mobile and landline. So I would love to introduce my guest tonight. Assalamu alaikum. We have Sayed Murtadha Naqvi. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Pleasure.
No, thank you for being here tonight. It's an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to hearing everything that you have to say. And again, I want to remind the viewers, if you have any questions, being a single Muslim, any questions regarding the topic, which is tonight, going to be on polygamy and muta marriages, which is also translated as temporary marriage. So without going into more detail, I would like my guest to introduce this topic for us tonight. Please, Sayed, would you please introduce us to these really important issues that we're going to be discussing today?
Thank you, Sister Fahima. Thank you, obviously, to British Muslim TV and all the sponsors. I think in terms of the topic itself of polygamy, permanent and indeed temporary marriage, it's a very contemporary topic that I think needs to be discussed on all platforms, whether wherever your background is. Polygamy within itself is not, I would say, it's not an Islamic concept in a sense, because it originated much before Islam. You find within the Greek Empire, there was this concept already existent. There was also within the Persian Empire, within the Roman Empire. And you find that polygamy itself was conducted many a moon before Islam. Even within the Bible, you find many a prophet is told within the Bible that they also, obviously done this practice. But polygamy within itself is actually a general term. The correct word that probably we're talking about within Islamic context would be polygyny, which obviously polygyny means that there's one man to several women, for example. And indeed, there's also the opposite side of that, which would be polyandry, which would be one woman to multiple men. You find primarily these sort of polygyny in itself, when you have one man and several women, is an act that's probably within the Middle Eastern world, even within Europe to a certain extent, in the African world. And polyandry, which is obviously one woman having several husbands, would be more of an act, I would say, that was originated within China and still practiced today in China and Tibet. And you find that, the norm or encouragement of this is not so much within the Western world anymore. And as in the term, within the Western world, you can only get married once and then you cannot have a second marriage, for example. But you find in places like Saudi Arabia, you find in places like Egypt, there's obviously this concept of polygamy, but also other sorts of concepts as well. So Saudi also promote other types of marriages, such as the misyar marriage. And you find in Egypt, it's not just the misyar marriage, they also have the urfi marriage, which are primarily Sunni thought marriages in a sense. And you find in Iran as well, you have this concept of polygamy, but you also have, other forms of marriage, such as the muta marriage, which is obviously more dictated towards the Shia theological school. Even more so than this, we just briefly touched on it. And we say that, within the Western world, because obviously, British Muslim TV is kind of in the name that we're British. So you find that the concept of polygamy in terms of legalized marriage, you can only have one wife.
Mm-hmm.
But, people are very evident that they do this all the time. Some people have, different versions of it. Some people are serial, they do serial polygamy, which is basically they marry, they divorce, they marry, they divorce, they marry, they divorce. Whereas on the other hand, people have a wife, for example, but they may have many mistresses on the side. For example, that would be another concept of polygamy, because it's not just dictated in a legal perspective. You can look at it from different avenues. But also in other aspects as well. If you go outside of the frame of marriage nowadays, polygamy is also conducted in the form of open relationship. And I don't really need to explain what open relationship was when British Muslim TV. I'm sure the audience is well aware of what that means. But even more so than that, people are not even having those sort of relationships the way people say that we're exclusive. You have open relationships. And then also nowadays, people have the concept of friends. They're not partners, we're just friends. And they have a multitude of friends. And obviously, as the discussion would build, you find that from a Western perspective, it's a very unfair judgment to be calling on Islam and saying, polygamy, Islam, 4 wives. Well, on the other hand, you could look at the concept of mistresses, or you can look at the concept of open relationship, or you can look at the concept of friend with benefits. So you can look at all of these different concepts, which effectively are doing the same thing, but because, we like to demonize Islam and Islam is bad and, all of this sort of malarkey, we find that we sort of, forget that, as they say, don't throw stones when you live in glass houses. So, you have your own sort of concepts. Islam has its own concepts. Everyone has their own lens. And throughout, obviously, history, we have our own understanding. So that's sort of the preamble to the discussion, and just touching on a few points here and there. But I'm sure as the discussion will develop, we'll obviously talk more in depth about each point.
No, absolutely. That was a brilliant introduction, actually. And that's why I wanted you to come in first, because I understand that you have the history and the vast sort of knowledge throughout. And what I like to also say, in addition to that, is on British Muslim TV, we have viewers from all over the world questioning us with these kinds of topics, even if it's illegal here. And we do actually know in Islam, we follow the law of the land. So we listen to your comments. We read your comments. And we do actually build this show, create the topics for all of you who are actually commenting and participating. And we do thank you for that. There have been a lot of questions recently, which I've read myself even, with regards to, is polygamy allowed? Is the temporary marriage allowed? And obviously, we'll go into this a lot deeper. But again, I just want to remind the viewers, this is a live call-in show. It's your opportunity to speak to myself or my guest today on 01924 231 083. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We do welcome here on British Muslim TV all types of Muslims, which is actually representative of all Muslims in the UK, which doesn't matter which sect or background that you follow. We represent all, and we welcome all, and we want to respect all views. And inshallah, we will continue with the discussion with regards to this. Okay, so Sayed, you've actually given a really powerful introduction, and you've highlighted many, many viewpoints there. What I want to touch on reality today is people that are concerned about polygamy that's happening, whether it's behind closed doors or not. But people are thinking that after a certain point in time, it's their right to have a second wife. And there are strict rules and there are strict regulations and responsibilities to this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, to be honest with you, there always is that concept of, each to their own. If you can handle, 2, 3, 4, then, well, God bless you. You must have a lot of willpower. But ultimately, if you're looking at this from an Islamic viewpoint, then if you look at, for example, people of Islam, for example, you look at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he himself, although, by the Orientalists, he's demonized of marrying a numerous number of women. But you find that when he was with Lady Khadija, may Allah bless her soul, he actually was with just her. And it was only after her passing away that he obviously, married a plethora of women. But even then, you find the Holy Quran, is very clear on the issue when it talks about, marriage in chapter 4, verse number 3. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clearly says, yes, you can marry 1, 2, 3, and 4, but it also has a caveat at the end where it turns and says, but if you fear that you will not be able to do justice, then marry one. End of the day, imagine you get married to 2 or 3 women. Obviously women never like to hear this, but the reality is it says in the Quran, and that's the issue. We're going to look at this through the lens of the Quran. I'm not here to give my opinion, and neither am I here to give opinion of people who are going to call in, or yourself or anyone else. You're gonna talk to the best of your knowledge and what it says in the Holy Quran. The Quran says that you can marry X, Y, Z women, right? And the conditions of who these people are there in Surah An-Nisa, who you can marry and who you cannot. And that's not a discussion that we're going to talk about today. But the reality is, as long as you can treat them justly, fairly. So if that means if I'm marrying 2 women and I give one woman a house, then I need to give the other woman a house. That if that means, for example, that if I, for example, dress up lovely for one woman and I don't dress up lovely for the other woman, then I've done a great injustice. As in, imagine I married 2 women and one woman I go dressed up, suited, wearing, for example, Creed and God knows what fragrance on myself. And then I go to my second wife and I wear, jogging bottoms, and I smell like an ashtray. Well, then just there and then you have done an injustice. Or if you ignore one wife and you, for example, give your attention to the other wife, and that wife, for example, looks to seek, her desires elsewhere while she's married to you because of your negligence, then that negligence is not upon her, but is upon you, because you are the one who took responsibility for her. So all of these things have to be considered. All of these things have to be considered. And also ask yourself the question that, am I getting a second marriage because I need to? As in, is my wife barren, for example? Or is my wife ill, for example? Does she have a mental problem or does she have a health problem? And we're not talking about morally, because morally this discussion can go on forever. We're talking about based on jurisprudence. That if there is no physical defect, right, or for example, mental defect, or, there's no problem, then are you getting married for the right reasons? Are you getting married for greed? Are you getting married for the wrong reasons, basically, or the right reasons? These are the questions that each individual has to ask himself. And that's not something that I can answer for any man, and I cannot answer for any woman if she chooses to be a second wife. At the end of the day, it's a very case-by-case basis. And also at the same time, everyone has their own free will. No one's forcing anyone to be a second wife, and no one's forcing the guy to marry a second time, ultimately.
Absolutely. No, that's very clear. The other issue is, I know you've set a few examples with regards to a woman being barren or cannot maybe have children. In many ways, there might be sort of rules to that. But nowadays, I think people have evolved where they become bored of their wives, or they can use that as an excuse. And people say, well, I don't have that same attraction. I don't have the love and connection. Like, how far? And these are real issues. These are real challenges that men are facing, and they don't want to break that marriage. They don't want to end in divorce and have, especially if they've got family. I know you said it's individual cases, but I'm trying to highlight some of the real cases that are here today. Now, what would you sort of guide a man in that situation, as well as the female? Because they also angered by the fact that maybe, the men actually have that choice, whereas they don't.
Well, obviously, in each relationship, you have relationship counselors. Okay, if there is that problem there, you can always find a solution to any problem. Ultimately, if you want something to work, enough. In terms of them being bored, well, maybe, stop watching Netflix and go out, do some activities, maybe go to a pottery class, or, do some archery, or run around the garden for 15 minutes. I don't know, But ultimately, you do something, right? End of the day, if you do nothing to seek a solution to a problem, then the problem will only get worse.
Yeah.
And ultimately, ultimately that's the case. And in terms of, second marriages, there's something else you have to think about as well, that, if I'm going to get a second marriage, right, or I'm going to go and do misyar, for example, or I'm going to do urfi, for example, or I'm going to do mut'a, for example, and we're not here to discuss the validity of these things, okay? Validity, maybe we can discuss on another night, but we're talking about things that actually exist within Saudi Arabia, within Egypt, within England, within Iran, for example. So imagine any type of marriage, whether it's a full-on marriage, as in a permanent marriage, or it's a misyar, urfi, or a halala, or a mut'a marriage, whatever type of marriage it is, you have to ask yourself that if by me doing any sort of marriage is going to have a negative implication on my family life, as in with my missus, for example, or with my children, then is it really worth it? See, there are many scholars who turn around and say to you, do not do it. Do not. So ultimately, if you're bored of your partner, then seek to do something new with your partner, right? Because everyone has many dimensions of their personality. It's just that you have to use a key to unlock it. But if you're not willing to pick up the key, then how can you expect to see what's behind the door? It's very simple. And unfortunately, in our society, it's not a case of whether Islam has done this or Islam. It's like, sister, you're too lazy yourself. You don't want to work on something. You don't want to put the effort in yourself, and yet you want to reap the reward. Well, you can't have, like they say, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to put the effort
Some can.
Well, I hope not. I hope no one's having too much cake. We already put on enough weight during COVID. No more cake for anyone.
No, of course. I hear what you're saying, and I really do second what you're talking about when it comes to, especially as a relationship coach here on, British Muslim TV and for SingleMuslim.com. We get a lot of cases, and of course, a lot of us, do feel that when you look for the assistance, it really does give you that direction that you require. Because a lot of us, think that we can get information and advice from our families and friends, but unfortunately, they're not going to give you something which is probably non-biased, non-judgmental. So we need the psychological sort of like input in there. So with you saying to seek that help, I really do advise couples that are going through challenges to seek that help and look within your household first to solve it before going to look outside for measures to maybe solve your case. The other thing I was trying to say is, again, I want to welcome everyone on the show and where you're watching on YouTube, Instagram, and live on Sky, Twitter. Thank you so much for all your comments so far. I'll try and go through them later on in the discussion. I also want to say that this is a live call-in show. Please do call in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, wherever you are around the world. It'd be amazing to hear your thoughts and what's it like for you and your challenges. On 01924231083. This is an important topic because I feel that a lot of women are actually really against the fact that, especially for the temporary marriage, that it can actually give maybe men an option where they wouldn't have normally. But I mean, on the other hand, if people are, like you said, going into relationships without the actual halal way, is that something that we need to consider first? Because I feel that people talk about engagement and halal dating. Is that even real? Because that isn't real unless there's a real actual contract, temporary or permanent. Doesn't that just take away from the sin itself? Even though people hate the fact that maybe it could be misused or it could be misconceptions about the rulings, and it can even delay permanent marriage if you are going to continuously enter into these temporary marriages. And could you maybe, define some of the terminologies you use? They all mean temporary marriage, right?
So, ultimately, when we speak about, you talk about any sort of marriage, the first and foremost thing of any sort of marriage is that there's a very possible thing that you can get divorced. And I think that's something that each and every one of us need to understand that and get that into our minds. Whether a time period is stipulated or a time period is not stipulated, there has been some cases where, a misyar or urfi or a muta marriage has been longer than many marriages. You've seen
That's
marriages
true.
that maybe last a month or two, and then there's some temporary marriages that have lasted for 2 years and eventually has blossomed into a permanent marriage. But the
Mm-hmm.
caveat to any marriage, and I want to make this clear to the audience, the caveat to every marriage here is that the wali's permission is needed. If, for example, a girl has not been married before, whether you're doing mut'a, whether you're doing misyar, whether you're doing urfi, whether you're doing halala, whether you're doing, I don't know what you're doing, whatever you're doing, it really doesn't matter. If you are Muslim, then that means that you need the wali's permission. And that's something that needs to be understood. Now, fundamentally, when you talk about misyar and urfi, see, urfi is a concept that was invented within Egypt and obviously within Al-Azhar University, which is basically the Oxford of Muslims in a sense. Urfi within itself, is, it depends how you define it, but some people have defined it as a secret marriage, a marriage that's done in secret that can eventually lead to a permanent marriage. Misyar, for example, is also a marriage that's seen to be permanent, but with the intention of divorce. So, for example, the Grand Mufti, I believe his name was Bin Baz, who was a Grand Mufti within the 20th century for the Salafis, within Saudi Arabia. You find that there he was asked a question that if someone enters a misyar marriage with the intention of divorce, then is that marriage acceptable? Well, according to the Grand Mufti, he said that yes, that marriage is still, because all of the conditions of marriage are met, and those are a number of stipulations that also, very clearly, all you have to do is a Google search and find out what the stipulations of marriage are, and there'll be maybe 6 stipulations. Sorry, go on.
No, that's very true. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that what you've said is so, I acknowledge what you're saying, and it's so true that people do have to do their research, and that's why we're trying to give the information and the awareness right now, because a lot of people are getting into relationships without even considering this, and they just, thinking that it's okay. But as people that are of faith, the Islamic faith, we need to consider our education so that when we do even talk to the opposite gender, we are taking these precautions to protect ourselves. We do have a comment from an auntie saying that she's looking for a potential partner for, I think it was her daughter. So I just want to say, the best platform for that is SingleMuslim.com. And if they did want to sign up, you can actually find potentials on there, and they have got amazing profiles where it's all being obviously vetted by the team behind us, so that we are definitely here promoting marriage and their serious relationships. So inshallah, if you do feel that there is struggle in finding a potential partner, then SingleMuslim.com is definitely your answer. What is your thoughts on where people are meeting online?
Well, the way I see it, as long as the intention is halal, and there's that intention there of marriage, and there's that there's that ethical pretense that I'm doing this for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. End of the day, what marriage you go into, as long as you have the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you think about Allah. Now that doesn't mean, let me put this very clearly to everyone, that does not mean that, you go out with the girl, you date the girl, you do X, Y, and Z, and just before you do one action, you're like, listen, sister, we must do, at that point, you won't be calling her sister, I'm sure. But, you at that point, you're like, let's do misyar, let's do urfi, let's do whatever you want to do, and then make it halal, Brother, you can't be doing everything haram and then right at the last minute, let's do something halal. You need to start, obviously you need to make that relationship halal from the beginning, and then obviously move it forward. But once again, it comes back to the whole situation that, you have to get the permission of the wali. You have to get the permission of the guardian. It's not as simple as, you can pick and choose. And I think that's one of the fundamental misuses of these marriages. These marriages were supposed to be there to help you understand a person in a halal way, whereas we're using them in a very negative way. And this is not the practice of the prophets, and these are not the practice of the imams, and these are not a practice of what they wanted. Because yes, jurisprudentially, you're doing nothing wrong on a fiqh basis, 100%. But you have to ask yourself, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has come and he said that, he didn't say, I have come to perfect your jurisprudence. No, he said, I've come to perfect your akhlaq, your ethics, your morals. And I do not think that this is something that constitutes to moral behavior, but you going from one man to another, or one woman to another. The only person you ultimately degrade is yourself. These things should be used in a wise, in a moral, and within an ethical framework. You can't
Absolutely.
Like
I think what you've highlighted is so important, and we will continue after the break. We are coming up to a short break on British Muslim TV, but in the meantime, please do stay tuned, and we are still taking your comments and calls. So please do bear with us if you are holding on right now. We will be back after the short break. Inshallah, we will see you shortly after the break. Assalamu alaikum. We have a comment on Facebook from Brother Abdul saying, okay, why don't women like being the second wife or third wife? Would you like to take that, Sayed?
I think you're the best.
I can give you mine. I know I am, but I'd like to know your sort of like I do have my opinion, absolutely, but I would like to hear a male's perspective. As a male's asking it, what is your view on this? Why do you think women may not like to be a second or third wife?
These are one of those questions where a woman asks you, she already knows the answer. If she doesn't hear the right one, you have an argument, isn't it? It's one of those ones.
No, well, I'm not going to argue with you, don't worry.
No, I look, end of the day, no one likes to be, number 2. No one likes to be number 3. No one likes to be number 4. And ultimately, everyone has an ego, whether it's a male or a female, everyone has their own sense of self-respect and pride. Some people, they're not brought up to, accept such a thing, especially living in the West, for example. We're always told, with those Disney love tales and God knows what else, that, my Aladdin is coming, my Hercules is coming, and all these figures that we're told that, going to whisk us off our feet. And this is ultimately true. And you find that in other cultures, for example, you go to Pakistan, for example, you go to Iraq, for example, Saudi Arabia or Iran even, these sort of practices are more norm. And you find that because this is not the norm of the society that we live in, being obviously in British Muslim TV, it's much more difficult for someone to accept that unless they've been raised to accept that. It's very difficult. And even I believe, even if it was something that they would accept it, somewhere deep down inside, end of the day, you'll always be considered. You'll always think that, I was second, or and you always have that thought, right? Because, end of the day, I can imagine as a female, if, that, if your partner's with someone else, you must feel something in your heart, whether, bad or good, whether something is halal or haram, that's a different question. And whether you feel hurt by something and, morally, is that something that should be done? Or that's a different question in itself. And at the end of the day, it brings it back to what I said initially, that ultimately when the Prophet ﷺ was married the first time to Lady Khadija, may Allah bless his soul, he was only, with that one person. Or, when Ali ibn Abi Talib, when Lady Fatima, may Allah bless their souls, he was also with only one woman at the time. So, it really, like I said, I still think you're in a better position, but I did answer as best I could, I believe.
And again, the topic is polygamy and muta marriages. We did have a comment with regards to why don't women like to be the second and third wife, and you gave your sort of perspective, saying that it's human nature to feel that jealousy, to not feel like you're the first one and someone else is choosing another over you. My opinion on that personally is from experience, hearing a lot of Muslim women that do come and speak and comment. Basically, they feel that I think a lot of modern women are not in a position to feel that they need to be, considered in that way. They want to be the only one. They want to be someone who is looked upon in that way. On the other hand, I've also had women that are not actually too sort of bothered about being a second wife. It is a very small minority, because I do think it depends on the circumstance. Obviously, if you're young and it's your first time being married and, things like that, you won't even consider being a second wife. But unfortunately, in our community as well, you do find women over a certain age, if they even haven't been married over 30, and unfortunately, they feel that they are only considered for a temporary marriage or a second wife. So it's also down to the community in which they view women after a certain point. And we are in the society delaying our own marriages, whether it is from destiny or even our own choices, because maybe we are studying more, taking and putting that first, with our careers, and that's delaying what our real sort of desires are. We also had another comment from I think it was from a WhatsApp message, asking the Sayed if you actually are talking from experience from what's our marriage, or is it just the general sort of point of view? It is up to you to answer that. What is your sort of response to that question, Sayed?
Well, to be honest with you, end of the day, whatever marriage, like I said, you sort of involve yourself in, as long as you do it within the ethical parameters, you respect the other person, and you don't be disrespectful, and you do everything within the barriers that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set, and whatever those scholars that whoever you follow, whether it's misyar, whether it's urfi, whether it's mut'a, whether it's permanent marriage, as long as you uphold the values that you believe in, then you should continue to do whatever you want to do. But also, bringing it back to what you said about, the women who are over 30. Look, end of the day, one thing I never quite understood was this, that look, if you pick your career over getting married and over starting a family, then you can't blame other people, men, for example, in picking younger women. That's their choice. You made a choice, right, to be a doctor or to be an engineer or to be an IT consultant, to be a director of a company or whatever it was. That was your decision. Whether you got married, whether you got into relationships, whether you didn't, whatever you did in your life, right, is irrelevant. The fact is, you're 30, 31, 35, 37, 40, 45, whatever your age is, right? Just like you had complete autonomy over your life and to make your decisions in your career, you can't be going around complaining that someone's picking me over a 25-year-old or a 21-year-old or a 19-year-old because I'm 30. Because at the end of the day, that's their autonomy over their life to make that decision. Like I said, you can't have it both ways. End of the day, if you're not willing to make sacrifices, right? Why should anyone else sacrifice what they want? I personally think that's an unfair comment. I genuinely do. For example, if I'm 40 years old and I've never got married and I'm a guy, right, and I choose someone, for example, who's not 40, I choose someone who's 30, for example, well, that's my decision. It's got nothing to do with what you got to complain about. You made your decision. So, I made my decision. And at the end of the day, what you sow is what you reap. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles. You can't start complaining about your decisions. You should either, if you got a complaint, then end of the day, get in the prayer mat and pray to God that Allah sends you someone wonderful. And if that doesn't happen, well then, you obviously ultimately have to live with the choices that you made early on in your life. And that's for male and females. And that's the bottom line.
Absolutely. No, definitely. And Islam does, that's why, sort of like encourage early marriage for a reason. But I think in our society that has evolved in the Western world, we have actually gone to a place where, especially for women, where we do want to put maybe the careers first. And as much as we have evolved over time, our chemical and our biology hasn't really changed, where we do obviously have children up to a certain age and we are looked in a particular way up to a certain age. So we have to consider the science behind it too. So, but I do also feel that there are a lot of people that are trying to get married alongside that. And there's lots of outside influences and external factors that do come to play. And there's a lot of pressure on women to actually be something more than they were before. And at the same time, maybe there should be some sort of like help or assistance with regards to them having a career as well as getting married. Do you think that maybe the pressures on their expectation on being married, because they expect so much and a younger guy can't do it and then they have to wait longer, then they have to work for it? I mean, what is your thoughts on that? Because having marriages nowadays is just so expensive and it's just ridiculous. I mean, at the end of the day, I think COVID has come in and actually helped a lot of people get married without wondering about how much it's going to cost because they're forced to make it simpler. So do you think, what are the other influences on people delaying their marriages?
Look, you know what? Anyone who ever asks me that question, I only have one question for them. Who do you worship? Do you worship the rizq or do you worship the razik? When you can establish whether you worship the money or you worship the Lord who brought money to us, brought crops to us, brought all of this food and this rizq to us, when you establish the answer to that question, then you'll also establish the answer to the question that you've asked. Ultimately, look, right? Everyone's career driven. Everyone wants to make money. There's been millions of people before you that couldn't take it to their grave, and there's going to be a million people after you that couldn't take it to the grave, right? Like I said, you can't have both things. And if ultimately, actually, you know what? I'll take that back. You can have both things.
Yeah.
If you get married early and you build a world where there's love, where there's compassion, where there's all of those things, then, you know, you can have your career. You can have a happy marriage. You can have all of those things. You can't blame, the only person to blame if you're 30, 40 years old and you haven't got married is yourself. There's no one else to blame. You can't complain about some guy or some girl rejecting you because of your age. That's your own fault. You know, you should have had more faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, took the leap of faith, and then been like, you know what? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala believes this is right for me, I'll take the leap of faith, and inshallah things will work out. And if they don't, well, ultimately at least you can turn around and say you tried. You rather go and have the fight, and there's a chance of winning, than never have a fight at all and end up losing.
I absolutely agree with you, because I know so many people that have had so many offers when they were younger and they're like, no, I'm not ready, or it's not right, it's not this. And I'm like, listen, you're not going to get the same thing even a year later. So don't take it for granted. When Allah sends you these people that come for marriage and ask for marriage, unless it's something specific, but now the sort of criteria are just ridiculous. So yes, I absolutely agree with you. We do have another question that's come online, and it's asking, what are the rights for mut'ah?
What are the rights for mut'ah? Well, the rights of mut'ah and the rights of misyar, for example, or the rights for urfi are quite, similar in terms of, you need to ask.
Okay, I have to interrupt. Before we go into that, I'd like to take a call, please. I don't want her to drop off. Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome. You're live on British Muslim TV. What would you like to say?
Yeah, hi there. I'm speaking from Dundee. My name is Rahad. Me and my sister would like to move from the UK, and we would like to get married, but something is coming in the way. My sister's in welfare guidance. We would like to get someone, and it could be in the UK, because in the UK, men are okay, but we would like to move city, and then we would like to get married and get a house. And then would you give me some advice? If you can give me some advice, that would be very nice of you, because I don't want to live in the UK. I know You just tell me what guidance have you got to say. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay, you could have stayed online because I wanted to question you further with what you're saying. Basically, I just want to quickly go over what I think I understood from the question was that she wants to get married, but I think she's moving abroad and she wants someone from the UK. What is the advice on that? Sayed, do you have any insight on that?
Unfortunately, I don't deal with immigration law.
Okay. Well, you know what? It's look, people are getting married all over the world, and yes, you have to consider, where you're going to move to and how that works. And now the world, as much as it's smaller, we do have, different legalities to that. So yes, that's a very, very good answer. To be honest, if you want to get married as well, personally, I think that, as a coach, we need to ask deeper, because we're doing so many things at once with you moving and you getting married, and that brings on different sort of questions to your potential partner, where you're going to find them, where you're going to settle. So maybe sort out where you are going to be residing first and see what happens. Or if you are looking at the same time, you have to be open and clear from the beginning that you are actually going to be moving, because that can actually also jeopardize your chances if you meet someone here and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm moving abroad. So just take into consideration that you have to be a little bit stable and settled to a certain extent before you make these huge, sort of like decisions, especially when it comes to marriage. Sorry, as we were interrupted before, the rights for muta, as one comment, wanted to have that question answered.
Well, off the top of my head, I can only remember a few, but obviously if they do a quick Google search, they'll know exactly what the rights are. But for example, if the person, you need the wali's permission, that's the first and foremost thing. Secondly, there needs to be a stipulation of the mahar, just like in, normal permanent marriage. There also needs to be a stipulation of the time period. And there also needs to be any conditions that can be put on. People have this misconception that, muta is only about, having sort of physical relations. No, the wali can put on conditions such as no touching, no kissing. You can also put on the time condition of maybe they can only see each other for 20 minutes in a day. So, there's this misconception that muta or misyar or whatever it is being used in a certain way. Well, if you go towards the wali, for example, if you were to ask anyone's father, he will turn around and say, yeah, no problem, but you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. There'll be 101 different conditions. And ultimately, I believe that, a lot of people misuse mut'ah. And I think that people should be using mut'ah in the time of an engagement period, where they get to know each other, where the wali puts down the stipulations of conditions, such as whatever the wali wants. And that way they can get to know each other in a halal way, because there's no halal engagement period, And I believe that likewise, I believe misyar and, could be used for the same purpose.
Same thing.
Yeah, it could be used for the same
we do have, sorry, Sayed, we do have that caller back online. Assalamu alaikum, sister. Sorry, you disappeared from us really quickly. Well, what more would you like to add to your questions so that we can understand and help you further?
I would like to move to India with my sister.
So you want to move to India with your sister? Okay.
Yeah. I have also asked a social worker. It will be, I know I might have to write a letter. I know I'll be a wee bit specific. I would like to get settled, get a career, then move to marriage. And I would like all the advice I can get, because we want to get married quickly. Because I want to settle down, have a family, start a new life. So what can you tell me?
Okay, so do you want to get married first and then move, or while you're moving? Like, what is the sort of like...
When I move with my sister, I would like to work, get a house, and then I could meet somebody, and I would like marriage to happen as well. What would you tell me? What is in my destiny? What would you advise?
Okay, but I just want to question you a little bit further. So are you actually going to be moving first?
That's what we're thinking about, yeah. I've been asking my social worker. She says that I need to just get advice from the doctor, and that the doctor will give me permission, but the lockdown is on, and I know I have to make a few arrangements.
Are you going to be moving permanently to the other country, or are you coming back here?
Well, I will be going there.
Yeah.
Because, marriage makes you permanent.
Okay, so you don't mind
Yeah.
moving and staying there for permanent marriage, okay? I mean, permanent sort of residence, and then
Yeah.
hopefully find somebody over there or over here.
I would like to go to India, and I would like to get somebody from there, me and my sister.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, and I wish you all the luck, and obviously, inshallah, you find someone amazing. You sound lovely, and thank you for your call. I would also advise you to join SingleMuslim.com because there's many people there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to.
You have to download the internet visa papers. Yes. But you should do it all online.
Yes, you can go online and you can download the app now, and it's free if you want to go onto SingleMuslim.com, and you will find plenty.
To fill up the forums, which site do I go on to?
SingleMuslim.com.
Which I could download, and which I can download, and I can then write it, and then send the visas to the India address.
Oh, when it comes to immigration, I'm sorry, I can only advise you on the relationship side of things. When it comes to anything else, unfortunately, you're going to have to seek. Yeah, you're going to have to seek a lawyer for that. But definitely go on SingleMuslim.com.
Okay. But I would like to
go on
have the visa papers. Thank you so much. Wish me luck for my thing.
Of course, I wish you amazing luck, inshallah. All the best for your move and you finding a new partner as well. Thank you so much for your call, sister. We did have another question with regards to how many can you marry when it comes to muta. Is there a limit for muta marriage? We have lots of muta marriage questions.
Yeah, I can tell. To be honest with you, I think if you want the details of that, I think that should be researched. It's only going to take a quick Google search for you to understand. But in terms of
every circumstances do differ as well, right?
Exactly. Every circumstance is different as well. But also at the same time, I think, people should be more worried about, like I said, it brings it back to the same thing. End of the day, like I said, the Holy Quran says that one is better for you if you can't do justice. End of the day, people are making a mockery of misyar. People are making a mockery of urfi. People making a mockery of muta marriages being used in an immoral way. Whether you can get married to 4 or you can get married to 400 or, it doesn't really matter. The question is that are you doing right by your soul? Are you doing right by the other person's soul? Because end of the day, your actions, you have to account for them. It's not just the base of jurisprudence. People are asking me fiqh-based questions. You have to ask yourself morally, right? Is it good for yourself morally to be with multiple partners, right? If you can answer that question, I think that's more important than asking, questions like, can I get married to 1, 2, 3, 4? Can I get married to this? Can I get married to this? How many can I do with muta? I think people need to, use everything. Everything that we are using is a tool. It's like a glass. You can use that glass to drink water, or you can use that glass to drink alcohol. The choice is yours, right? The tools are there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided you with the tools. Now it's your responsibility to use them correctly. And if you do not use them responsibly, then you will have to ask for them. You will have to answer for them in your grave. It's really simple as that.
Well, you know what? I wanted to ask this question myself, but we did have a comment just now from a brother on Facebook saying that muta is used as prostitution under the name of Islam or, Islamic sort of marriage. What's your thoughts on that? We hear that a lot.
Yeah, this is also said about, the misyar marriage. And it's also said about the urfi marriage. But, the Quranic verse is very clear on the issue. In chapter 4, verse 24. And I think people speak from a place of ignorance more than anything else.
And experience, which is not necessarily following the laws.
Exactly. And ultimately, when you say that it's prostitution, well, I don't know anyone that would go to a prostitute and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or say an Arabic siga, for example, or give mahar, for example, or, ask the wali, for example. So when someone says something, absurdly ignorant like that, it just highlights what an ignoramus person that person is. And ultimately, chapter 4, verse 24 in the Holy Quran is very clear on the issue where it says, so for whatever you enjoy of marriage, give them their due compensation as an obligation. And there is no blame on you for what you mutually agree to beyond the obligation. And I would go even further than that. Hanafi scholars, right, for example, like Zamakhshari, right, in his tafsir, or Fakhruddin al-Razi, which are both Sunni scholars, have even gone further to say that the verse is translated incorrectly, but should be translated like this: as for whatever you enjoy of marriage, in brackets, for a certain period of time, give them their due compensation as an obligation, and there's no blame on you. And obviously, you know, the verse continues, and just in case people know Arabic here, then the derivative that is used is istamta'tum. So mut'a, and the derivative of that, or derivative of this, would be istamta'tum, which is obviously saying the same thing. So when someone turns around and says, you know, misyar or urfi or all of these things is prostitution, well, I never met a person who went to a prostitute and has to ask the wali's permission, has to give a specific dowry, for example, has to put down what conditions they are and whatnot. And even if that's the case, that he still feels that is prostitution, well, then he has to contend with chapter 4, verse 24 in the Quran, when it clearly states, for whoever you enjoy of marriage, give them their due compensation. So what are you saying that the Quran is stipulating prostitution? So maybe you should use his words more wisely and not, for example, speak out of position when effectively, you know, you don't actually know the ins and outs of something. I believe that's the problem in society today. And I think that's the problem with both, you know, Muslim parties, all Muslim parties, that you don't understand something and you talk for the sake of talking. You know, you need to understand, have you read about mut'a? Have you read about misyar? Have you read about urfi? Have you read about halala? Do you even know the conditions of marriage? Do you know the witnesses that are required in marriage? Do you know how divorces occur? You know, you don't know anything about anything, and yet you can spew this garbage from your mouth. You know, you need
to be fair, there are very many scholars that have actually spoken about it, and they do give their opinions. So we are taking into consideration there are various opinions. But as you mentioned, even in both sects and in various madhabs, they have made it clear that it does have some sort of like agreement with that. Even if there's a certain amount of interpretation, the interpretation is not to say that it's anything to do with prostitution. If anything, it protects the woman. And even the women have to be like a proper divorce in iddah period where they cannot even be with another man straight away, even in the temporary marriage as well as the permanent marriage. So there are strict rules and guidelines. And I do say that what the Sayyid has mentioned, please do seek advice from your scholar, your imam, whoever you follow, because you will have the real guidance there. And they all, even if they have slight differences, do have an agreement together with regards to these sort of different interpretations. I just want to say it has been absolutely enlightening to hear you speak, and it's gone by so quickly, and it's been such an interesting discussion. Are there any final thoughts before we end the show? And I just want to say again, thank you so much for coming on board and speaking about this. It's not an easy topic to discuss, but you've been very, very very open and, with regards to everything that you've said. And I hope that, inshallah, that it's given us some sort of guidance with regards to moving forward to having halal, proper relationships if we are entering into it. What are your last thoughts, Sayed?
I think my last thoughts are, exactly what I've mentioned. You need to consider the moral avenues, the ethical principles, right? Understanding laws is one thing, and using laws to your advantage is one thing. But remember that you have to answer for everything that you do. Make sure, end of the day, Islam is all about akhlaq, is about morals, is about understanding and to be understood. And, even more so when you're married, your partners, that's what it's all about. Being respectful for one another's, not only their rights, but also their feelings. And if, for example, they say that the heart is the temple, is the mosque where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or gods live. That's where God lives, in people's hearts. So end of the day, if you hurt people's hearts, then know that you have hurt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we are all the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, if we hurt the creation, then how do we expect to be forgiven from the Creator? So end of the day, whatever you do in life, think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, think about your family, think about your self-respect. And if you are married, then think about your partner and how they feel. Because end of the day, they say happy life, happy wife.
Happy
Or
wife.
happy life, where you want to spend it. So, ultimately, this is something that you have to consider. And I think that's really it,
Absolutely. No, I really thank you so much for everything that you've said, all your insights and information. I really thank you so much. Thank you all, dear viewers, as well. I really appreciate your time, Sayed. Inshallah, stay safe and well. And, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you all, dear viewers, for watching and all your calls. I look forward to seeing you on the next show next week. Take care. Stay safe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.